Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. So this video is about the no confidence vote, and as was universally predicted, Theresa May's Conservative government survived that no confidence vote. They won by 19 votes. I remember, John Bruton, the former Taoiseach, as in Prime Minister of the Republic of Ireland, he was giving evidence at some House of Commons committee a few days ago and saying this is an awful pity. Sinn Féin, the main nationalist party in Northern Ireland, they're not in the British Parliament, they're elected to it, but they have this policy of abstention, which they've pursued for over a century now, refusing to take their seats. And anyway, if they were there, would it have tipped it? They'd have to take an oath of loyalty to Her Majesty the Queen, which they refuse to do because they claim Northern Ireland's not part of the United Kingdom. Doesn't stop them claiming their parliamentary allowances, though. But anyway, even if Sinn Féin had been there, it wouldn't have tipped it. It wouldn't have been sufficient. So even the Conservative rebels, the real rebels like Anna Soubry and Ken Clarke, they did vote for the government in the end. I was wondering whether they would say, well, it's so important to stay in the European Union, or at very least to avoid a hard Brexit. We've got to collapse this government because that stands as the best chance of avoiding leaving the European Union without an agreement. So anyway, they survived by the skin of their teeth. There's been nothing like it since the 70s. When eventually, obviously, the Labour government of Jim Callaghan lost by a single vote. I suppose, ironically, that had come down to Northern Ireland as well. Frank Maguire, this independent nationalist MP for Fermanagh. So the government previously suffered its worst defeat in almost a century the day before on that withdrawal agreement. Now, Theresa May appear to be a complete malapert. I've got to feel a bit sorry for her, but she's carrying on manfully, if that's not the wrong word to use in regard to her, okay, gallantly, and seems to suffer these slings and arrows of outrageous fortune with great fortitude. Negotiating Brexit was never going to be easy. But look at what it took to get the United Kingdom into the European Economic Community, as it then was. Because the UK joined the EEC on New Year's Day 1973 and had taken about 10 years to get in. Remember, Harold Macmillan's government was rebuffed in the early 60s. Harold Wilson's Labour government was rejected in the late 60s when the French President de Gaulle said very imperiously, no. But perhaps he was dead right, saying that the United Kingdom would stick its oar in and the UK would never be committed to the European Economic Community because of the Commonwealth and so on, and just had an island mentality. It split parties. Ted Heath managed to get the European Communities Act ratified, the Act of Accession passed, but there were lots of Conservative rebels. He required some Labour people, mostly Labour moderates, to vote for it, blah, blah, blah. So it was as divisive as anything since, say, Catholic emancipation in the 1820s. And then there was that referendum on staying in, which Harold Wilson, the Labour Prime Minister, had to hold because though he tried to bring the UK into the EEC in the late 60s, in the early 70s he opposed it on the basis of the wrong terms of accession. So it was a post factum referendum. There we are. And so it was a cross-party issue. But the thing is, the leadership of the three major parties were all in favour. So May was dealt a difficult hand, but she managed to fumble even that one, and leading the country into a snap election when the polls seemed uniquely favourable, 25-point lead, and she almost snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, and then made this pact with the DUP, which she didn't have to do, but gave her a bit of a cushion in Parliament because she knew there were going to be rebellions. There's no way you can keep everybody happy, especially the extremists, either Remainers or Leavers. The trouble is the DUP then want to have their cake and eat it. They want there to be a porous border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, therefore the EU, but they don't want single market alignment. Well, you can't have both. Make your mind up. And business and trades unions and all sorts of people in Northern Ireland are clamouring for just sign off on this deal and it'll make our life easy because it could cause terrible headaches in cross-border commerce and so on. Dissident Republicans are seeking to capitalise on this and bring back the conflict that was thankfully closed over 20 years ago. So Theresa May was cut off at the knees by her own party. People like Ken Clarke and Anna Soubry and some of the headbanger Remainers who'd stop at nothing to try and keep the United Kingdom in the EU and thwart the popular will, and indeed the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg, the European Research Group, for whom no agreement was ever going to be good enough, and we're living in cloud cuckoo land, a shopping list that thought the EU would have to agree to everything they wanted and give no concessions in return, or just leave the EU. Now, I'm not totally against leaving the EU without an agreement, but I do recognise that there are going to be difficulties. There are going to be repercussions, and people are kidding themselves if they think that it'll be all plain sailing. So Labour has been disgracefully partisans, playing games to gain ground. But of course, they say officially, yes, we are for Brexit, we respect the result of the referendum. But they want to do anything to wrong-foot the Conservatives, and they managed to discomfort Theresa May quite a lot. The thing is, do they really want to take over right now? It's a poisoned chalice. It wouldn't be easy for them either. But most Labour MPs were Remainers, something like 9 out of 10. Now, some of the Remainers are reasonable, said, okay, we accept, we've got to leave now. But there is a large minority in Labour, at least, who are hardline Remainers, who are stealthily seeking to scupper the result of the Brexit vote. Someone like David Lamb, who's been quite open about it, and I have a modicum of respect for him because he stated his view plainly, more or less, from the morning after the Brexit referendum result, saying we don't have to do this. And of course, he is correct. Parliament is not legally obliged to give effect to the result of the referendum. It is just that, refer eundem, ask them in Latin. It's not a plebiscite. I wish it were. But May seems to be insouciant, but perhaps she's almost past caring. She's not going to be Prime Minister for very much longer. She survived that confidence vote in her own party, not by as much as most people thought. But after the 29th of March, that's Brexit D-Day, she may well be pushed out by party. Right, thank you. It's been a pretty dreadful 2.5 years. You can go. Retire to Spain. That would be a rich irony indeed, wouldn't it? But Jeremy Corbyn is not smirking because his troubles may only just be beginning. He used to want to leave the EU, or prior to that, the European Economic Community, which was much less integrated than the EU. This is before the Single European Act and all that. Remember, the European Economic Community then morphed into the European Union with the Treaty of Maastricht, signed in 1992, which took effect in 1993. In the 1983 election, when Corbyn was elected to Parliament, Corbyn campaigned passionately for the UK to leave the European Economic Community, and that was Labour policy at the time. And he remained in that position well into the 90s, when that was no longer Labour's policy. Labour went from being Europhobic in 83 to being zealously Europhile by the late 90s. So then he campaigned for Remain, but everyone could tell his heart wasn't in it. A lot of the far left see it as a capitalist club run by corporations, and there's quite a bit of truth in that. The regulations designed to create a cartel to price small enterprises out of it. So entrepreneurs, family-run businesses, they're very hard to break through. There's this very cozy coterie of multinationals that have the market to themselves. He said there should be no second referendum. So Corbyn's at odds with most of his party. Don't forget, a couple of years ago, his party was trying to boot him out. But because things have been going very badly wrong for Theresa May, the heat's been off him. And of course, he performed actually quite creditably in the 2017 election. He exceeded all expectations. But then again, the job of a leader of the opposition is not to come close, is to win. It is to become Prime Minister. He had one shot and he failed. And I think these days you get one go at it. And if you fail, that's it, you're gone. Neil Kinnock led Labour to defeat in 1987. They kept him as leader, but he failed again in 1992, admittedly more narrowly. But they should have booted him out. I think that's it. Sorry, you've got to be ruthless about this. So the other trouble for Labour is there's a dissonance between the parliamentary party and the grassroots. The Labour parliamentarians are very much Remain, a high majority of them, whereas the Labour heartlands, they're ordinary voters, these are some of the most pro-Leave constituencies in the realm. So there's a disconnect there. However, these are safe Labour seats, ones that it's very hard to see them losing, especially now UKIP is a busted flush. There's been much talk of a renaissance of UKIP, and rumours of its rebirth are greatly exaggerated. It's not going to happen. They've lost their sugar daddy, their membership's fallen off a cliff, their leader can't even remember his name, and they had Tommy Robinson join and blah, blah, blah. So, as I've said for a few weeks, I think it's going to be a general election quite soon, even though the Conservatives have won this no confidence vote this time. Maybe some people will abstain. Maybe the Conservatives might even do a constructive vote of no confidence. Well, May could just call another election. but she said she wouldn't lead the party into another election. But I really don't see any other way forward, because to swap leaders would take some time. May say, okay, I'm going to stand down as leader of the Conservative Unionist Party and therefore as Prime Minister. Conservatives need to find a new leader. That can take 2 months. Now, if one leader were to emerge, only one person were to nominate, then that's it. The person would be elected nem con. But it's hard to see someone going to be elected unopposed, because if it has to go, the MPs would have to whittle it down to just 2 candidates. The 2 candidates are then put to the mass membership, the ordinary card-carrying members of the Conservative Party, perhaps 100,000 of them in the kingdom, and they would choose. But that would take a long time, and there's just over 2.5 months to go. There's not time for this kind of thing. Anyway, so there we are. There may be another no confidence vote ere long.